Hello and welcome to Caregiving from Afar. My name is Jessica Barch and I'm a Community Program Manager for the Parkinson's Foundation. I'd like to start today by thanking our veterans for their service. We appreciate you today and every day. The Parkinson's Foundation will be hosting virtual events each Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. To learn more or register, please visit parkinson.org/pdhealth. You can also visit this page to view past archived PD Health at Home programs. PD Health at Home is presented by the Light of Day Foundation, whose generosity has made this programming possible. Before introducing our speaker today, we'd love to ask you, our audience, a question pertaining to today's topic. If you have any technical challenges with the poll, or at any time, please use the Q&A icon and we'll respond to you right away. So as you see, a poll is on our page, and we are asking, are you currently providing care to someone with Parkinson's? And we'll just give a moment here for all of you to vote. All right, so we have our results, and it looks like majority of people, 64%, said that they are currently not providing care to someone with Parkinson's. Thank you so much for answering that, everyone. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Adriana Gonzalez. Ms. Gonzalez is a graduate of San Diego State University, obtaining her master's degree in social work. Adriana has spent the last 7 years dedicated to providing clinical social work services in a medical setting. 5 of those years have been at the University of California in San Diego. Adriana is committed to working closely with the clinical team to support patients in meeting their treatment goals. Adriana is bilingual, speaking both English and Spanish, and leads the Juntos Unidos group, a Latino outreach program for Parkinson's disease. Outside of work, Adriana enjoys traveling, listening to live music, and spending time with her family. Thank you so much for joining us today, Adriana, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for that introduction. I'm really excited to be here with all of you and to be presenting on this topic and to talk about primary caregiving from afar. I think it's a very important topic to talk about, especially right now with the pandemic, where a lot of people maybe weren't caregiving from afar, or even if they lived down the road, now that they are in this role. And it's important to talk about it and talk about the differences and how to support families living with Parkinson's disease. And so today we're really going to talk about the different types of caregiving. We broke it down in 3 different parts, but of course, this is all, it's really hard to put things in little boxes. And so all of this is very fluid, and everybody's going to have maybe being a primary caregiver from afar 1 month and maybe being a primary caregiver another. It's always changing, but we'll talk about what primary caregiving looks like, what it is, what primary caregiver from afar looks like, and what a secondary caregiver from afar will look like. And so when we think about the primary caregiver, what we're really talking about is someone who's faced with taking care of a friend or a loved one who can no longer care for themselves. And the primary caregiver often lives with the individual who requires care and provides support with activities of daily living. And I think it's really important to remember that with a progressive disease such as Parkinson's, those activities that a caregiver is providing is really going to change over time. And so at the beginning of the journey of Parkinson's disease, the primary caregiver maybe isn't doing that much. And it's really about supporting through processing the diagnosis, figuring out what Parkinson's disease is, finding support groups and information. But over time, their role is really going to shift, and that it's so important to pay attention to those changes so that we can best support that primary caregiver. And care partners, another term that we like to use, because it's, especially at the beginning, we're really partnering in this. And that distinction is really important for so many families. We also are going to talk a little bit about primary caregivers from afar, what that looks like, and we'll hear some examples later of real life primary caregiving from afar. So this is someone who's providing care to a friend or a loved one. They're likely not living in the home with them, and that kind of support can look like arranging for in-home care, helping with navigating the healthcare system. And so again, from afar, really can mean from down the road or from across the country. A secondary caregiver maybe is still providing support to a family. They're providing support to a friend or a loved one. And again, could be close by, could be far away, but is providing more indirect support, because that direct support might be more challenging. They have their own kind of life that they're managing. And so that can still be a caregiver, because you can still provide things like emotional support, care packages, and really provide a different type of support to the primary caregiver. And again, when we talk about caregiving, it really differs for each person and can look so differently. But ultimately, what we're really talking about is having a family or a loved one that we deeply care about that is navigating through changing disease, and us finding ways to be able to be supportive, not only to the person living with Parkinson's disease, but also to the people that are providing that primary and that direct support. And really thinking about, as we all try to navigate our own time and family and work commitments, we're trying to fit in how to best support families. And so we're hoping that with these different examples that we give, you can see that you're the support that you're providing is important, and it's an important piece of the puzzle of providing care to somebody. And especially with the pandemic and navigating COVID-19, I think it's put a lot of us in a position of caregiving from afar. And so what exactly does that look like, or what can it look like? And what are some things we really want to give some tangible examples of what that can look like in terms of supporting your loved one? And one of the things that I see often in the work that I do is family members who support with navigating the healthcare system. And so as Parkinson's disease progresses, so many of our patients have so many specialty appointments, not just their movement disorder specialist, but they have to see a urologist, and they still have to see their primary care provider. And so that can be often overwhelming for the primary caregiver in the home to manage all of the different appointments, to be able to understand all the information that they're getting. And so because the beauty of technology allows people who physically can't be in the appointment to be able to attend that appointment, whether it's over the phone, listening in, via FaceTime, via Zoom. And my experience has been that doctors are always open and welcome to having other people not only provide information, but also be of support to the patient and be hearing what the different plan for treatment is going to be. And along with navigating the healthcare system comes scheduling all of these appointments and figuring out looking at the calendar and really putting them down. And also, so many of our patients, they often experience issues with insurance, or something didn't get approved, or they got a bill for something. And so those are things that are really helpful, and that family or loved ones can do from afar to really support. And I always say, kind of take one thing off of the plate of the primary caregiver. Also, locating community resources. What's so helpful with also technology and Google is that we don't have to be in the same city to understand what local resources are available to people living with PD. It also is in this network that we're creating within the Parkinson's Foundation. It couldn't be a phone call to the foundation to say, I have a loved one in this part of town, or even in this other country. And because we're all connected and working together, we might have a list of a good go-to person to start. And so that is always a really good place to provide support. Again, because Parkinson's disease is progressive, over time, those care needs are going to change. And that is a very overwhelming part of providing care to our loved one, in knowing when's the right time to bring in more outside care, or when's the right time to talk about future care needs and exploring things like placement. And it's very overwhelming, and it can be very heavily placed on the shoulders of the primary caregiver living in the home. And so as a caregiver from afar, that's something that we can explore with them. For people who are able to provide respite care, I think that's a really great way to support a primary caregiver. And respite care doesn't have to look like, I'll spend a whole week providing care. It can look like I can go have lunch with my loved one while you go and take a walk, or tend to your garden, or go to the grocery store. And so really thinking about that in a broader terms, in terms of providing respite care. It can look like a couple of hours, and it can look like a week. It really is thinking about, what can I provide, and how can I be of best support to my family or to my loved one. And financial support. So I do talk to a lot of families who also feel a lot of frustration that they can't provide more respite care, that they don't have a lot of time to help with these other things. But it's about finding, what can I do? And if providing financial support is something that someone is able to do, then I always encourage them to explore that. Secondary caregiving can look a lot like the primary caregiving, but it can also look different, because it's about exploring again, what commitments do I have? What type of support can I provide? What makes the most sense for me to be able to have a balanced life, but still be able to support these people that I really care about? And so, one thing that I think families find really helpful is to schedule a daily or weekly check in, and really checking in with that primary caregiver to determine what they would consider helpful. So if you say, hey, I want to call you every day at 6 o'clock, they might think, that's a little bit too much. That's a little overwhelming. But how about a weekly check in? And so it's really letting them guide what is going to be helpful. And with that weekly check in, I think for a lot of us, our tendency is to want to say, kind of, tell me what's going on and tell me how this week went. Maybe that primary caregiver doesn't want to talk about the care that they provide. Maybe they want that hour to be about talking about the grandkids, or talking about the Netflix show that they're binging, or the book that they're reading. And so it's really about, as the secondary caregiver from afar, saying, tell me what's going to be helpful, and we're going to start there. Also, because of technology, I think offering to manage bill pay or set up automatic bill pay. And again, these are just little examples of things that we can offer, and give tangible things that we can offer to a caregiver. I think a lot of families who are caregiving from afar say, I tell them that I want to help, and they say that they're fine. And so sometimes it's on us to say, hey, how about, what if I do this? Would that be helpful? Or how about, have you set this up? I can do that for you today. We can kind of do it over the phone. And what a lot of my patients and their caregivers don't realize is that those little things are helpful over time, even if they're looking at big picture and maybe are overwhelmed. But taking those little things are going to allow them to focus on the bigger things. Support with decision making. And so that just means, listening to what the primary caregiver is experiencing. And as they are navigating the challenges of deciding what's next, or what type of care, or what type of treatment, or should we do DBS? There's so many decisions that sometimes have to be made. And being a sounding board can be really helpful for some primary caregivers. And some other little examples, helping with online grocery shopping, and something as simple as sending a care package, sending flowers to get delivered, or candles, or chocolate. Just for primary caregivers, it's really important for them to practice self-care. But so many of us say that, and it's not so practical sometimes because they're in it. And if we can provide a little bit of joy by sending some flowers, or if mom likes plants and you know that she's wanted this plant for a long time, really tuning into that and listening in for the things that they like that maybe they haven't been able to get for themselves, and sending that is just a quick little moment of joy to say, I'm thinking about you and this is for you. And most importantly, when I talk to families or friends who are trying to support a loved one through their journey with Parkinson's disease, is to ask, would it be helpful? And it might be that it wouldn't be helpful. And so then we switch gears. And again, it's a little bit on us to ask the questions, and then to provide some examples of, I went to a support group, or I did this conference and I heard that this family found this helpful, and so I thought I would ask if you might think that would be. And what's really important, or what's really come out for me in my work, is that communication is really key. And Parkinson's disease, day to day, can be so different. Or it can be that somebody was really kind of coasting along, I call it, for maybe a year or 2 years, and not a lot of change, just kind of like these micro changes, and then kind of get hit by a curveball and things start feeling really off balance. And so instead of kind of that global question of how are you, I like to add, how are you today? Because today could be different. And so putting that in there really allows the primary caregiver to know that you're not asking it just to ask it. You're really asking, how are you today? How are you right now? Be specific in your offers of assistance. Again, when our primary caregivers are managing so many different things and day to day could look so different, really be specific in what you can offer. Hey, would it be helpful if I sent you dinner every Wednesday night, and that's something you wouldn't have to worry about every week? And see if that would be helpful. What's your favorite meal? What's the favorite thing that you guys don't often eat but really love it? Always approaching with curiosity. And I think when we love somebody, we're not there in the day-to-day to help, we sometimes want to say, what's going on? We need to fix that. How do we change that? I'm really worried. And I try to remind people, kind of take a step back and really approach it with curiosity. Hey, I noticed that dad can't really get out of his chair. When did that happen? And oh yeah, that started happening last week. And then really follow up with, gosh, has that been harder for you? Is that more work for you? And so really eliciting from the primary caregiver if that is a big change for them, or if maybe they were able to manage that change pretty well. And so it kind of takes us away from assuming that it's a problem, and really allowing the primary caregiver to tell us if it was a problem for them. And always, and this is something that takes practice, that I'm still learning too, is ask permission to give advice. At the end of the day, everything that we're doing is out of love. But we do need to be a little bit careful with the language that we use. And so always asking permission is just a way to say, we're in this together. And would it be okay for me to tell you what I read that might be helpful? Or is it okay for me to share my concerns with you right now? Maybe in this moment, the primary caregiver would say, right now I'm really overwhelmed and I can't go into this right now. And then maybe we can say, well, maybe we can check in a couple of days, and hopefully you'll feel differently. But it's really allowing that primary caregiver to see and build that trust that we're in this together and I am listening to you. And that really just plays into the reflective listening, really in tune. It's also a skill that we sometimes have to learn of our tendency again is because everything is coming from love of wanting to jump in and make things better or help in some way. And sometimes it's really helpful to listen and just reflect back what the primary caregiver is telling you. So if they are having a day where they feel worried and she's losing her balance more often, I feel like I can't leave her side for a minute, even when I need to go to the bathroom, I'm worried that she's going to fall down, and I'm nervous, and really trying to say, wow, you don't feel comfortable leaving her alone anymore, even for just a minute. It really sounds like her care needs are increasing. And that is giving them time to really tell us how it's impacting them. And with that information, we can kind of file that away. And if in that moment they can accept our advice, if we have any, then asking permission. But in that moment, it's really about listening and allowing that primary caregiver to let us know what's going on. And caregiving from afar, I think a lot of people don't realize that it takes a toll. Even if you're not in the day to day, in the home, so many caregivers from afar are still thinking about their loved one and that primary caregiver all the time, and thinking about what could I do differently, or am I doing enough, or I'm really worried about the primary caregiver, whether it's mom caring for a loved one or dad or sister. I'm really worried about that person and their own health, and I wonder if they're getting to see the doctor. And so it's going to bring up a lot, from guilt to sadness, even for some people, relief that they don't have to see kind of the changes every day, and frustration. And so, caregivers of all types would benefit from having their own practice of care and their own emotional support system in place. And what's really lovely is that it can look like so many different things. For some people, it's, I want to be part of a support group, and I go to all of the talks that the foundation does, and I have my group of people in my town that also are caregivers to people with Parkinson's. If that's not how you feel and you want to do it differently, and maybe exercise is more helpful, or having your own therapist, or a mindfulness practice, or any combination of those things, I think ultimately the first step is acknowledging this is hard, and I can say that this is hard. And what do I need in order to still be present in my own life, whether it's in my career or with my family or in my social life, and also be present and supportive to the family members that I'm providing caregiving from afar to. Okay, boss. And so here we really wanted to outline some very real examples of families that we've come across who are in this exact situation. So the three that we chose that we thought were really great to share with all of you is the first one. I live in California, but my mother lives in mainland China. I read and watch online programs to educate myself about PD so I can support her in her Parkinson's journey. So that is really a perfect example of what secondary caregiving from afar can look like. There's not a lot that maybe she can do from California in terms of finding programs or finding resources. But if I understand Parkinson's disease, then I can hear what her concerns are, and I can support her through those changes and normalize what she's experiencing. Another one, my sister takes care of my brother with PD. I live in another state, but every summer we visit, and my brother stays with us to give my sister a break. So that's a great example of providing respite care. And that, again, can look like a day of a break or the entire summer. And so it really depends on what your capacity is, as the person who can provide the respite care. And the last one is, I have 2 children and a full-time job, so my time is very limited. My beloved uncle with PD is in an assisted living home across town. So when I do grocery shopping on Saturdays, I make sure to drop by on my way home with his favorite snacks. So again, that is a great example of a secondary caregiver really thinking about what would brighten his day. And right now with the pandemic, I think a lot of families are having a hard time with having their loved one in an assisted living. And that's still something that you could do. Maybe you can't see him and eat his favorite snacks with him, but you can still deliver them, or you can still deliver a little care package to that person with a note on there kind of saying, thinking of you, love you, maybe a picture. So those are just little thoughtful things to show that you're thinking about them and that you're there for them. And here's a little something for you to brighten your day and bring a little bit of joy to your day. So now we have the privilege of hearing from 2 Parkinson's Foundation community program managers, Jessica Barch and Sarah Osborne, who both have firsthand experience with caregiving from afar. And we're going to start today with Jessica.
Thank you, Adriana. I appreciate the introduction. And again, I just want to thank all of you who are watching and joining us for this program today. So again, my name is Jessica Barch, and I'm a community program manager for the Parkinson's Foundation. And I do have a personal connection to Parkinson's, and that is my dad, who lived with the disease for about 13 years. And also, I really want to point out that he and my mom, who was his full-time care partner and caregiver, were really my inspiration for wanting to serve this community. Initially, when I learned of my dad's diagnosis, it was very difficult. And the way I coped with it was trying to really avoid it. And I felt that that actually made things a little bit worse. So what I ended up doing was learning as much as I could about the disease, and that really helped me become a better advocate for my dad. I started with the foundation about 6 years ago in a volunteering capacity, and it brought me to where I am now. And it's really been a joy of mine to reach out to these communities and provide educational programs and really just help people live better lives. So I wanted to share something before we pass this on to Sarah Osborne, and that is a picture of my dad, because I think it's always important to put a face with a name when you're talking about someone. So just give me one moment while I share this. So that is my dad, Chuck Barch, and really, really great guy. And, you know, he really lived well with Parkinson's for a long time. So again, he and my mom are my inspiration. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for sharing about your father. We're going to also allow Sarah Osborne to share, who has a younger brother who has been living with Parkinson's disease since 2011. Sarah?
Hi, thank you. I'm Sarah Osborne. I am also a community program manager with the Parkinson's Foundation. Thank you all for being here today. Yeah, so like Adriana said, my brother John was diagnosed about 9 years ago in 2011. He was 32 at the time. There were a lot of strange symptoms he was having. He had a tremor, and he was falling and just generally unstable. And so he was seeing a lot of specialists, and he ended up at a movement disorder specialist, the only one in the state of West Virginia where we're from. And within the first 20 to 30 minutes, she had diagnosed him with Parkinson's. So it was very confusing for the entire family. We were very overwhelmed. We were denial, we were confused. And so I, like Jessica, I found the Parkinson's Foundation. I went online and I read everything I could. I consumed a ton of information, read everything that was out there. And what I really liked about the foundation was it felt very hopeful. So I was lucky that there was a position open, and I was able to start working out here in Los Angeles, California, where I'm based now. So I'm going to go ahead and share a picture of my brother. So this is at our first moving day. Moving day is the walk that we have. This is the first one that they went to. Is my brother on the left and my father on the right. My brother wasn't sure he wanted to come to this initially. He was a little hesitant to come out and be in front of people and be in front of a community. But he ended up loving it. You can see here how happy they are. They had just finished the walk and they were really excited. They learned a lot and had a really great time. And so it was really nice to be able to share that with them. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, Sarah and Jessica. I think it's such an honor and a privilege to hear people's stories, because I think what's powerful about sharing is that somebody can see in someone else's story something that resonates with them. And that is always a way to kind of open up that space of, we're not going through this alone, and knowing that there are other people who maybe have been able to navigate some of those challenges. They can support us as we navigate similar ones. And so I wanted to just follow up with some questions, and maybe start with Jessica. Tell me a little bit about something that has stuck with you in terms of what you really learned in that moment of learning about your father's diagnosis, and kind of the way that you processed it. Now that you can look back on that time, what's something that's really stuck with you that helped you push through and really get to that place where you could be actively supporting your family?
That's a good question, and that's interesting. So, something that I would look back on that really stuck with me and helped me to actively support my family would be the fact that we had to learn to forgive ourselves. And what I mean when I say that is that, my siblings and I, so there's four of us, and some of us live out of state, some of us live here. And the thing is that we all have our lives and we're busy and with our families and work, and we also have our dad who's ill and who's progressing, and my mom who's affected by this greatly, both of them, of course. And so I think it really is about forgiveness, because even though we would help in different ways and try to take different things off my mom's plate and really coordinate with each other in order to do that, we always felt, at least I did, I always felt like I could always do more. And so there was a guilt that came with that and frustration. And I ultimately realized that anything that we did was helpful to her. Anything that we did took some of that off her plate. And it was recognizing that. And it took a while to get there and to recognize that. So that is something that I felt like it was a good lesson, something that I learned.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's so powerful to say, to give language to all of the different emotions that are going to come up for somebody as they navigate through. And as you reflect back, I love that you pointed out, but it was helpful, even though in the moment it didn't feel helpful, because the changes felt probably so big and it was so overwhelming. But reflecting back, you can say, wow, that little thing that I did was helpful. And I want the people listening today to really try to remember that even if it's small and even if it doesn't feel like it's enough, it's still helpful.
Yes. Thank you.
And Sarah, so we kind of talk about navigating family dynamics, which Jessica touched on a little bit in terms of having siblings that you're navigating care with, some local, some out of state. And so given that this is your brother and not your father, your mother, I'm sure that's a different level of dynamic that you had to manage. And you talk a little bit about the beginning, you kind of consuming a lot of information and maybe other family not consuming it as fast. How did you balance that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, so I'll say at first I didn't even realize that I was a caregiver from afar. I didn't even know what that meant. It was during a few years ago, it was a random conversation with someone from our education department. And I was talking about something and they said, "Oh yeah, you're a caregiver from Afar." And I said, "No, I'm just his sister. I don't live there." And they said, "No, you're a caregiver from Afar because you do these things to support." And that was the first time that I really thought, I thought of myself that way, and thought, that I had something to offer for his caregiving and his well-being. So to answer the question, I guess, about how I navigate the family dynamics, I'll say, it's a work in progress. There's not like a best way. We haven't found, the best way. Sometimes I like what you said about asking permission to give advice. I think that's hard when when you have all this information and you want to share it. And I think it is really important when you're navigating through everything that you do say. Would it be helpful if I sent this? But I think really more important is just to keep going and keep trying, and don't give up. Keep that person's well-being front and center. Remember why you're involved and why you're doing what you're doing. I will also say that it's not always easy. And for my part, sometimes if you can't offer the advice or do, exactly what you were hoping would be helpful, advocating in the community, for me, that's been really great. Doing the work that I do, and volunteering and doing those things in my community really helps me to feel empowered as far as what I can contribute to fighting Parkinson's disease.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a perfect way of acknowledging that there is no right way. It really is. Every family is going to face the challenges in a different way. And so sometimes our role is just to listen, to learn what doesn't work, and then to maybe switch gears to try different strategies or to try different ways of providing information. And with ultimately, that goal of saying, maybe they don't want this information now, but I have it filed away. And when they are ready to make a change or to go to a support group, then I'm going to be ready to help and facilitate that and make it easier for them to find that. And one thing that I often hear is, we can't control what other people choose to do or not to do, but we can control how we decide to show up for them. And I think kind of both of you mentioned a little bit of that emotional toll. So I'm so curious, what are some things that you have done to kind of push through those really heavy emotions of guilt or sadness or frustration? And what are some things that you found helpful in order to help you kind of move through that and be in a place where you feel okay?
I guess, ways that I've kind of pushed through those range of emotions is, and I should have kind of went over this a little bit more when I was talking last, but I really think is in, trying to do everything that you can do. And also, like Sarah said, recognizing that even if it's someone else that's pointing it out to you, recognizing that you are actually helpful, right? So, even when you feel you're not doing, you're not doing enough, the way I would get through those very difficult times was that I really had to recognize that I was doing a lot, and because I have my family and I have my career, and I think so. There's 4 of us kids, like I was saying, and my one brother who lives, close to my mom as well. We both live, about 15-ish minutes away from her, and we really coordinated everything that we could do between the 2 of us. And then my sister, who was wonderful, coming in from Wisconsin with her family, she would come and, pick up my dad and drive 6 hours back the next day and let my mom have off a couple weeks, right? So I think by this like kind of patchwork quilt of this system that we built together, we knew, like just recognizing like this is helping my mom. Like my brother and I coordinating, one of us would be there every day. when my dad had gotten to the point where it was worse and he needed a little bit more help with, more than my mom could do. And, one of us would be there every night to help with his bedtime routine or during the day, and we literally made a schedule. I'll be here on these days. You are here on these days. And then my sister would coordinate with us. And I think all of us just felt that by being able to create this, because it was hard, it was hard, it was emotional, and you're so drained and you're like, okay, I'm running over there at 10 o'clock at night because my mom needs me in an emergency. And, and my son went to sleep a couple hours ago. And, it's like, you're trying to push through it. But I was so grateful for those moments and the support of my family and all of us to be able to coordinate all of our efforts and know that we truly did make a difference.
Wow. So really kind of rallying together, leaning on each other as a family, acknowledging that it was hard and giving each other permission to say, gosh, this is hard and I'm tired.
Yes.
Sounded like it was helpful. Sarah, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, so the way that I handled those emotions was not well. That's the short answer. My brother and I are very close. And we're 2 years apart. I mean, they say that's the longest relationship you have in your life, right? Is with your sibling. And we're very close. And so I had a call with him. We talk all the time, but we had we do a call on this day and I can expect he's going to call at this hour. And he started experiencing some cognitive changes, which were very, very overwhelming for me because I felt helpless. There's nothing I can do. And so I didn't handle it well. I stopped answering the phone. I started getting very emotional and overwhelmed every time I'd see the phone ring. And so sort of the way that I navigated through that was the same way Jessica just described, is reaching out to other people in the family and saying, have you noticed this as well? This is what I'm seeing. For me, so it's kind of like, if a grandparent hasn't seen their grandchild in a while and the child looks really tall to them, but the parent doesn't see it because they're there every day, right? So for me, that was sort of I'm seeing this. Are you seeing this? What is it that you're seeing? What are you concerned with? And then sort of talking about what we could do. Maybe, he didn't want to take his medications. He doesn't want to do this, but what can we do? And a lot of what we can do is just to be there for each other and talk about it. So that for me was how I worked through a lot of, and I mean, I still struggle with it. I'm not saying, that either. I still struggle with it, but I think that was a big part of how I became better at handling that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It sounds like it was really challenging. And I think I want to kind of go back and acknowledge that we each have different ways of coping with things. And so that insight to know that I can't answer this call, I can't handle it. That is really important, to give ourselves permission to say, I can't handle this right now. I need to maybe phone a friend or phone this other family member to kind of work through what's coming up for me, so that when I pick up that phone, I can be supportive and I'm not reactive, and I feel a little more grounded in how I'm kind of managing myself. And so I think even when we feel like we're not doing it right, I think we are doing it right, because it really is about acknowledging what you need in that moment to kind of settle into this change and to be the best loved one to that person experiencing these symptoms. And I want to kind of move a little bit and ask about, one of the things that you mentioned is, as a caregiver from afar, you might be noticing things that maybe the person who lives with the person living with PD isn't noticing. And so what are some kind of lessons learned on how to communicate that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that when you're, particularly for me, when you're talking about those cognitive changes, those are much more emotional to discuss and to bring up when you're seeing those changes. And, bringing up something physical, it's not easy, but something like a cognitive change, it just gets so much more loaded, and it's so much more emotional. So I'll admit that I don't always get it right. You were going through a lot of the do's and don'ts, and it's in our caring and coping book too. And I would say I probably did all of the don'ts at some point. But I do think that, the takeaway is to keep trying and to keep focused on doing the right thing. One of the great tips here that I use is these big conversations are not for email or text. These are conversations you should give your person a call, your primary caregiver a call, and talk about it. And also to respect that they are the primary and that they are going to have more insight than you have. And so to defer to them in those conversations when you're bringing things up. And also, not to offer too much unsolicited advice is another great tip from here, which I try to follow. So I might preface or follow up with any of this information by saying, would it be helpful if I sent it more information on cognitive changes? Would it be helpful if I looked up a specialist psychologist in the area and sent that? Would it be helpful if I called and made an appointment? So I think that's another really important approach when you're bringing up these difficult topics.
That's a great point. Jessica, did you want to add something?
Yes. You're talking about cognition, right, Sarah? And my dad had, dementia from his Parkinson. So I think anything with cognition, for me, at least from the perspective of being a daughter of someone with Parkinson's, that was always harder for me to see than the physical changes, right? Those are difficult, of course. But my dad didn't have tremors. He had a lot of freezing, stiffness, slowness of movement, but never like the real obvious ones that you always associate, right? Like tremors. But it was the cognition that was hard. So what I learned was to, kind of tread lightly and ask my mom in a very delicate way, have you noticed this, or put things on the onus on me. Like, I've noticed that dad seems to be, a little bit more forgetful, or what do you think about, how has it been for you lately, Mom? Has it been a little bit more difficult with Dad? Do you feel like you need more help? So I think autonomy is so important. So, and that's something that I really had to discuss with my siblings, because there's a lot of like pushing what you think should happen in a situation. And I said, whatever it comes down to, it's whatever Mom and Dad want to do, and we just have to support them. So that was something, approaching delicately and trying to really be, how would I want someone else to approach me in the situation?
I love that you mentioned that autonomy, asking permission. Also, I found that normalizing, it's so normal in Parkinson's disease for there to be cognitive changes. Is that something that you've talked to the doctor about? Or I read that it's really normal for someone to, so I think also framing it that way kind of helps people with Parkinson's and their primary care partners kind of take a deep breath out of, okay, this isn't something else that now we have to deal with. It's really can be part of the disease progression. And it really sounds like from both of your experiences that taking care of self, paying attention to what comes up for you, right? Kind of thinking about, how would I feel if I was in this position? Taking a step back before asking to give advice. All of those are things that you both have done so well, and that takes practice, and it's not easy to do. When you love somebody so deeply and you're experiencing the loss of kind of their cognition or their mobility, that's all a loss that you're experiencing collectively with everyone. And so I love that you both touched on taking care of yourselves, grounding yourselves before jumping into what might be helpful. And I think that's such a good lesson for all of us to learn, and all of the dynamics of our family of, right now, this isn't about me. You know, right now I'm providing support to this person, and what I'm feeling, maybe I can explore that in a different way, whether it's with a different family member or in a support group or in therapy or on my yoga mat, however that plays out. That's really the inner work that some of us have to do when we're providing that caregiving from afar. So thank you for sharing those experiences.
Thank you so much, Adriana, for that wonderful presentation, and also just for moderating that discussion between Sarah and I. We really appreciate it. So now we're going to be starting our Q&A segment. And if you have not submitted any questions, you can still do so by clicking on the Q&A icon located in the black banner on the bottom of your page. So I'll be starting right now. Adriana, this will go to you. I worry that my father's care needs are increasing, but my mother insists that she can handle it. I worry about her health. How do I help?
I think that's a really common scenario that I work with in the work that I do in the Parkinson's Disease Center at UC San Diego. And so a lot of the conversation, I usually start with finding out what that means. And so how are the needs increasing? What changes are they experiencing? And so I think a lot of times my advice to the caregiver from afar is, let's take a step back. Let's figure out kind of how much of this might be our own anxiety and how much is it really from our loved one, and really try to tease that out. Because if the primary caregiver is being a little bit resistant to additional care, I think that's where we kind of start building rapport, maybe saying, hey, kind of going a different way. Like, do you have a social worker in your center that maybe you can chat about to dad's changes? Or have you been to a support group? Because sometimes getting that information from a different person, not the family member, is going to land a little bit differently.
Great, thank you. So this next question, I believe I will take. It said, what specific tasks were you able to provide from afar that the primary caregiver found helpful? So just to kind of reiterate, even though I was a caregiver from afar, I really was about 15 minutes-ish away from my mom. So I was able to be there in person in some respects. So actually very often. But some things that I did from afar was that I really helped with the finances and bill pay, things that my dad primarily did before, because he was the one that was more comfortable with using a computer and my mom really was not. So I took that over, and that really took a lot of anxiety off of her, and really just took something else off of her plate. Something else I did was I picked up prescriptions if she couldn't run and get the prescription from my dad. So I would run over there, bring it home, one less thing for her to do. Another thing that I think is very important to reiterate again is really delegating tasks, especially if you do have siblings, which I know not everyone does have. So that becomes a little bit more complicated, and I recognize that. But for those who are able to delegate more tasks, and maybe it's not a sibling, maybe it's just a good friend of the family, really, that's also a way to help the primary caregiver and also the caregiver from afar. So I would say those are the ways that I did some of the tasks I did. Sarah, I have a great question. My loved one with Parkinson's will not do anything he's supposed to be doing. I feel so helpless. Is there anything I can do?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think that's an experience that a lot of us have as secondary caregivers. We want the best for them, and we have really good intentions. At the same time, I think, what Adriana was talking about earlier about asking permission is so important. And that can be really hard to accept, that maybe you don't have permission to sort of force them. Your instinct is to force them. You need to take your medicine, you need to exercise, you need to do this. I personally got to a point where I ended up calling the helpline. And I know, Jessica, you said you've done the same. I called and I said, I'm so overwhelmed. He's not doing anything. I'm scared. I'm afraid for him. And what they did was they reminded me that it's not up to me. I'm not the one with Parkinson's. My brother is, and I'm not the one, who can force him to do that. It's only going to make it worse. And I needed to hear that. I needed to be reminded that I have to stay in my lane and I have to, focus on what I can do. And so for me, and I mentioned it earlier, that has looked like advocacy in my own community, getting involved in the walks, volunteering, so that I feel that I have an outlet to help, even when that outlet isn't helping my brother directly.
Thank you, Sarah. That's a great response to that. And maybe Adriana, if you can follow up with that, because I know that apathy is something that we see sometimes in Parkinson's and makes the situation a little bit more challenging. And maybe explain briefly what apathy is, and just in some ways, maybe we can try to navigate that a little bit.
Yeah, apathy is so challenging because sometimes when I think about it, and when we talk about the non-motor symptoms of Parkinson's disease, depression, anxiety, apathy, they all kind of live in the same sphere of really challenging symptoms to understand, one, and to treat. And so when I talk about apathy, because I think there isn't a lot of information about it, and there hasn't been a lot of research about what's helpful for it, how I try to explain it to families is it's almost kind of a teenager attitude of like, whatever, like, it's not depression where someone isn't, they're not in this really dark place or sad place. And it's not anxiety. It's just kind of I don't want to go. And so for a lot of families, that apathy really is a barrier to exercise, to socializing with family members, to going to support groups. And so what I try to educate families about is, your person. You knew them kind of before these changes started. And so is there a balance that can happen where you push a little bit that person to go to the support group, maybe push a little bit to take a walk around the block, and really picking battles where if it's something, as the primary caregiver, sometimes we have to kind of let go of some of the things that we want for them, kind of along what Sarah was saying with and what you had mentioned, Jessica, when you were telling us about your dad, the autonomy. And it's this really fine balance that has to happen. And so I always remind my patients and the family members, if there's apathy there, know that it's normal, know that it's part of Parkinson's disease, and know that maybe you can challenge it a little bit if you want to see if that works. And then know to really not take it personally and kind of take a step back and let it go when you need to. So it's really hard, and every family is going to be different, but that's always my feedback to families about apathy. It's so challenging, and there still isn't a lot of treatments that we've really seen have been effective to help people through that.
Thank you, Adriana. Sarah, maybe you can answer this one. So someone had said that I found it helpful to understand that this is progressive disease and to find education about how to help slow the progression of movement changes. Where can I find more information on motor changes and how to help? And maybe Sarah, you can talk a little bit about our PD library through the foundation.
Yeah, I love our PD library. It's one of the first things I found when I stumbled onto the foundation site. And Danielle, I don't know if you could share that in chat, but it's a website we have where you can search through our PD library. You can sort it by topic. It's really helpful to find out about those motor symptoms, depending on, which ones you're experiencing. One thing that I think people tend to do is they maybe get too much information. And what I like about this is that you can sort, okay, I'm experiencing freezing, or I'm experiencing this particular issue, and you can get information just about that. Another great resource that we have that I love and that I use in the community all the time is our care map videos. So those are videos that are for caregivers. It's really helps to understand those practical things that you can do to help with motor changes from your side, like occupational therapy type of things, practical ways, getting in and out of cars, scheduling meals, stuff like that. So that's another resource that I love, and I send people to that YouTube site all the time.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. So we have just a very little time left, and this is not really a question, but I think it's such a great comment from one of our attendees who are watching today. They said, having a husband who had ALS, I found it challenging to help him and not feel sorry for me that my life now had changed. As a caregiver, a positive attitude is so important. And I just have to say that I completely agree with that, and I know that Sarah does as well. And Sarah, why don't you just kind of share with us a parting thought as far as your brother and just how everything has been with this experience?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that I do with my family is use humor. We're all that kind of a family. We can joke around. And so I, like, for instance, my dad, I'll send him dad jokes, just to keep like things positive and just to check in with him. And I think humor is really important when you're facing any sort of progressive disease like ALS or PD.
I will share a thought too. And Sarah, first of all, I completely agree with you. My dad was one of the funniest people that I knew. So, but something that kind of sticks with me in a parting thought is that caregiving really is an act of love, right? So I always share this because my mom, who's just this person that has so much grace, we all become frustrated, especially those who are providing that care 24/7. And something that she said to me really stuck with me. And that was that she loved my dad more than she ever had. And I really believe she was saying it was because of that experience, because there's really no other way to prove how much you love someone by caring for them, right? And really caring for them in this way that is very exhausting. And at the same time, so rewarding. And that's my parting thought for that. So that does conclude our Q&A segment. And I just, again, want to thank, of course, Adriana for being here with us. And I just wanted to share some parting thoughts. Just give me one moment, everyone. So I would love for everyone watching today, really, we have a great program coming up to join us next Wednesday. So we have our Care Partner Town Hall, Self-Care at Home, and our wonderful Parkinson's hotline specialists are going to be talking about how to focus on you, the caregiver, and how to really carve out time for yourself. Also, again, a big, huge thank you to Adriana. We really appreciate your expertise and your time today. We're very grateful. And also to all of you watching and attending, and we're so grateful that you've joined the program as well. For up-to-date information about Parkinson's, please visit our parkinson.org website, and also our wonderful helpline at 1-800-4PD-INFO. We're always here for you. And last but not least, I just wanted to share this quote, because we just want to thank all of you for doing what you do for the person in your life who has Parkinson's. We see you and we thank you. So thank you, everyone. Please stay safe and healthy. And thanks again for joining us.